The title of this conversation sounds almost magical. Say these words to a narcissist, they'll never disrespect you again. And if you're here because you're exhausted, hurt, and wondering if there is finally a sentence powerful enough to make someone stop mistreating you, listen carefully. But there are words that transform you from someone they believe they can repeatedly push, guilt, intimidate, or manipulate into someone who is no longer participating in the cycle. Narcissistic people often do not begin relationships by openly displaying contempt or disrespect. Instead, they may gradually test boundaries to determine what behaviors another person will tolerate. These tests can be subtle at first. A sarcastic remark disguised as humor, dismissing your opinions during disagreements, interrupting you repeatedly, showing up late without apology, violating small commitments, or criticizing you and then insisting that you are too sensitive. Each incident may appear insignificant on its own, making it easy to rationalize or overlook. You may tell yourself they are stressed, misunderstood, or unaware of the impact of their behavior. The problem is not the isolated event, but the pattern it creates. Every time disrespect is minimized, excused, or accepted without consequence, it provides information about what access they can maintain while disregarding your needs and feelings. Boundaries are often interpreted not as personal values to honor, but as obstacles to navigate around. If a sarcastic comment receives nervous laughter instead of objection, the next comment may become harsher. If yelling leads to reconciliation without accountability, the intensity may increase. The behavior is adjusted based on what appears effective. This dynamic can leave you constantly adapting, trying to preserve harmony, while becoming increasingly disconnected from your own discomfort. You begin questioning whether your standards are unreasonable rather than recognizing that your reactions are signaling something important. Respectful relationships do not require repeated demonstrations of what you will endure. People who value mutual respect pay attention when you express hurt, adjust their behavior, and recognize that maintaining closeness should never come at the expense of another person's dignity. Many people believe that if they can just explain themselves clearly enough, provide enough evidence, or find the perfect combination of words, they will finally be understood and treated fairly. In relationships with narcissistic individuals, this instinct can become a trap. When you over-explain, you unintentionally provide more material to debate, dismiss, distort, or use against you. A simple boundary such as "I can't come tonight" turns into a lengthy justification about work obligations, exhaustion, family responsibilities, and guilt. Instead of leading to understanding, the conversation shifts into an interrogation of your reasons. A narcissistic person may challenge each explanation individually. They may tell you that your reasons are not good enough, accuse you of being selfish, point out inconsistencies, minimize your experience, or frame your decision as evidence that you do not care about them. What began as your attempt to be considerate becomes a negotiation over whether you are allowed to have needs, preferences, or limits at all. The more you defend your position, the more you may find yourself feeling confused, anxious, and compelled to prove your innocence. This does not mean explanations are unhealthy in all relationships. In emotionally safe relationships, explanations foster understanding and collaboration. The difference lies in intention. Healthy people seek clarity. Manipulative people often seek leverage, learning to say, "That doesn't work for me," or "I've made my decision," without launching into a detailed defense can feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you have been conditioned to earn acceptance through justification. Yet brevity protects your autonomy. You do not need a courtroom argument to validate your boundaries, preferences, or choices. Your decisions remain legitimate simply because they are yours to make. One of the most unsettling realizations in relationships with narcissistic individuals is that emotional intensity is not always a sign of sincerity. Many people assume that if they express enough pain, cry hard enough, or reveal the full depth of their hurt, the other person will finally understand the impact of their behavior and respond with compassion. In healthier relationships, vulnerability often invites empathy and repair. With a narcissistic person, however, strong emotional reactions can sometimes become information they use to maintain influence and control. When they notice which topics provoke fear, guilt, shame, or desperation, they gain insight into what keeps you engaged. If you become highly distressed at the thought of being abandoned, they may threaten withdrawal or give you the silent treatment. If guilt quickly changes your decisions, they may frame reasonable boundaries as selfishness. If criticism deeply wounds you, they may alternate between approval and disapproval to keep you seeking validation. The issue is not that emotions are weaknesses. Emotions are natural, valuable signals that reflect what matters to us. The problem arises when someone repeatedly exploits those emotional responses rather than honoring them. This is why calm, concise communication is often more effective than emotionally charged explanations. It is not about suppressing your feelings or pretending not to care. It is about choosing where and with whom you express your vulnerability. A statement such as, "I won't continue this conversation if I'm being spoken to this way," communicates clarity without providing an opening for emotional manipulation. Remaining grounded helps you stay connected to your own judgment rather than being pulled into cycles of defending, pleading, or reacting. Your feelings deserve care and respect, but they do not have to become bargaining chips in someone else's attempt to maintain power over you. One of the most painful lessons people learn in relationships with narcissistic individuals is that respect cannot be earned through sacrifice, patience, or proving your worth. Many enter these relationships believing that if they love harder, become more understanding, anticipate every need, avoid conflict, or demonstrate unwavering loyalty, they will eventually receive the care and consideration they have been giving. They assume that enough effort will inspire appreciation and mutual respect. Unfortunately, this belief often keeps people trapped in cycles of disappointment and self-abandonment. Over time, the focus shifts away from asking whether the relationship is healthy and toward asking what else they can do to make it work. They become hyper-vigilant, monitoring tone of voice, choosing words carefully, suppressing their own needs, and trying to prevent emotional outbursts before they happen. When disrespect occurs, they may blame themselves, wondering if they should have been more patient, less emotional, more supportive, or more forgiving. The standard for receiving basic decency becomes increasingly unattainable because it is tied to performance rather than mutual humanity. Respect in healthy relationships is not awarded to the person who tolerates the most discomfort or gives up the most of themselves. It is a foundational expectation extended to both people regardless of temporary disagreements, imperfections, or differing opinions. You should not have to earn the right to be spoken to kindly, have your boundaries acknowledged, or have your feelings considered. When someone repeatedly withholds respect until you meet their ever-changing demands, the issue is not a lack of effort on your part. It is a relational dynamic built on imbalance, where your value becomes conditional while theirs remains unquestioned. No amount of proving your worth can create genuine respect in someone unwilling to offer it freely. Now, if this conversation is resonating with you, take a moment to subscribe and share it with someone who constantly feels pressure to explain why they deserve respect. Many people believe that setting a boundary is simply a matter of stating what they want or do not want. They assume that once they clearly communicate a limit, the other person will understand and adjust their behavior accordingly. In relationships with narcissistic individuals, this expectation often leads to disappointment because boundaries are frequently viewed as challenges rather than guidelines. A narcissistic person may hear your limit, acknowledge it in the moment, and then test whether you truly intend to uphold it. This is why consistency becomes more important than the boundary statement itself. For example, you may say, "I will end this conversation if you continue yelling at me." If the yelling begins and you remain engaged for another hour explaining, defending, or hoping they will calm down, the message becomes unclear. The spoken boundary says one thing while your actions communicate another. Over time, this inconsistency teaches the other person that persistence, guilt, anger, or emotional pressure can override your limits. The cycle repeats because the consequences remain unpredictable or absent. Consistency does not mean becoming harsh, rigid, or punitive. It means aligning your behavior with the values you're trying to protect. If you say you will leave the room when insults begin, you leave the room. If you decide not to answer repeated late-night messages filled with accusations, you do not engage. Each time you follow through, you reinforce trust in yourself and clarify what participation in your life requires. This process can feel uncomfortable because many people have been conditioned to prioritize others' reactions over their own well-being. You may fear appearing selfish, unkind, or unreasonable. Yet consistent boundaries are not about controlling another person's choices. They are about taking responsibility for your own. The strength of a boundary does not come from how firmly it is spoken, but from how reliably it is honored through through action. Narcissistic individuals often pay close attention to uncertainty. When your language is filled with hesitation, repeated apologies, or invitations to negotiate your own limits, it can signal that your position is flexible and open to pressures. Statements such as, "I know this is probably unreasonable, but maybe if it's okay with you, I was thinking I might need some space," communicate doubt before the actual boundary has even been expressed. Even if your request is completely valid, the uncertainty surrounding it may encourage further testing, persuasion, or attempts to change your mind. This does not mean that vulnerability, kindness, or diplomacy are weaknesses. The issue lies in the absence of clarity. When you consistently soften your needs to avoid upsetting someone, you unintentionally teach them that persistence may eventually wear down your resolve. They may continue arguing, bargaining, criticizing, or guilt-tripping because they sense that your discomfort with disappointing others is stronger than your commitment to your own limits. Certainty sounds different. It is calm rather than aggressive. It does not rely on threats, lengthy explanations, or emotional intensity. It sounds like, "I'm not available tonight. That doesn't work for me. I won't continue this conversation if I'm being insulted," or "I've made my decision." These statements do not attempt to control another person's reaction. They simply communicate where you stand. People who respect you may still feel disappointed, frustrated, or disagree with your choices, but they generally adapt without trying to dismantle your sense of self. Those who rely on control often struggle with certainty because it removes the endless negotiation they have come to expect. Learning to speak with clarity is not about becoming cold or detached. It is about trusting that your needs, decisions, and boundaries deserve expression without being wrapped in excessive permission-seeking or self-doubt. One of the most exhausting aspects of dealing with a narcissistic person is the belief that if you can just find the right strategy, say the right thing, love them enough, or finally help them understand the impact of their behavior, they will become the partner, friend, parent, or family member you have been hoping for. This belief often keeps people locked in a cycle of endless self-improvement directed toward changing someone else. You monitor your tone, choose your words carefully, suppress your anger, become more patient, read books, seek advice, and repeatedly give second chances. Your energy becomes focused on managing their reactions rather than understanding your own experience. The difficult truth is that lasting change cannot be forced upon another person. You cannot create insight where there is no willingness for self-reflection, and you cannot manufacture empathy through sacrifice. The more you organize your life around changing them, the more disconnected you may become from your own values, needs, and limits. You begin measuring your success by whether they approve of you, calm down, stop criticizing, or finally acknowledge your pain. Shifting your focus from changing them to changing your participation in the pattern is where genuine empowerment begins. Instead of asking, "How do I make them understand?" you begin asking, "What do I need to remain emotionally safe and true to myself?" You decide which conversations you will engage in, what treatment you will no longer tolerate, and what consequences you are prepared to follow through on. You stop chasing the version of them you hope exists and respond to the reality of who they consistently show themselves to be. This shift does not guarantee that they will behave differently, but it changes the role you play in maintaining a dynamic that has repeatedly harmed you. The most powerful part of boundaries is often misunderstood because people assume strength comes from sharper words, stronger arguments, or more emotionally charged declarations. In reality, the deepest shift happens when your communication and your behavior finally align. Many people can say, "This is not acceptable to me," yet continue to stay in conversations, relationships, or situations that repeatedly violate that statement. When words and actions do not match, the boundary loses its meaning, regardless of how clearly it is spoken. When alignment finally happens, something subtle but profound changes in the dynamic. You are no longer negotiating your limits in real time. You are no longer hoping the other person will eventually understand through repetition or emotional appeal. Instead, your statement becomes a reflection of a decision that is already in motion. If disrespect continues after you have expressed your limit, you disengage. If a pattern does not change, you adjust your access or your presence. This consistency removes ambiguity, which is often where manipulation thrives. This does not mean every situation requires immediate exit or extreme action. It means your internal commitment is clear. Even if your external response is gradual. You begin trusting your own perception enough to act on it without waiting for external validation. Over time, this reduces anxiety because you are no longer trapped in cycles of over-explaining or hoping for different outcomes from the same behavior. What makes this transformation powerful is not control over the other person, but the restoration of self-trust. You stop overriding your own discomfort to maintain connection. You stop questioning your reality when something feels wrong. The sentence, "This is not acceptable to me," becomes more than words. It becomes a turning point where self-respect is no longer an idea you express, but a standard you actively live by in real time. If you take nothing else from this, take this understanding with you. You were never meant to earn basic respect through exhaustion, explanation, or emotional sacrifice. The shift you are being asked to make is not about finding flawless words that control another person's behavior, but about becoming someone who no longer abandons themselves in the process of trying to be understood. When you speak with clarity, when you stop over-explaining, when you hold your limits with consistency, and when your actions finally match your awareness, something important changes in you long before it changes anything around you. Some people will adjust when they encounter your boundaries. Others will resist them, question them, or attempt to push past them. That difference is not a measure of your worth, but a reflection of what the relationship was built on from the beginning. What matters most is whether you continue to participate in patterns that require you to shrink, justify, or tolerate what harms you in order to keep connection alive. Real change begins when you stop asking how to be understood by someone unwilling to understand you and start asking how to remain anchored in your own truth, regardless of their response. You are allowed to choose distance over disrespect, silence over chaos, and clarity over confusion. And the more you practice that alignment between what you say and what you do, the less power confusion, manipulation, and emotional volatility have over your life. In the end, the strongest boundary is not what you say to someone else, but what you finally decide you will no longer say to yourself.